everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're bringing you a review of Etherfields. Now, this was a game I was super excited about when it came in. I love Awakened Realms. Tainted Grail, This War of Mine are two of the ones I've played from them so far, and I've got more on the way. The only one I don't have on the way so far is ISS Vanguard, and that's mainly just a budgetary thing for me. If I had the money to grab that one, I would have already. I certainly will be grabbing ISS Vanguard in the future. So that gives you an idea of what I went into this game expecting, how much I already expected to enjoy this game when it arrived. I have played this game, I've played 12 scenarios, but a total of 19 times. So, you know, several scenarios I failed on a few occasions, and spent a total of 24 hours playing Etherfields. All my reviews are always going to be based on, or I have to have a minimum of 20 hours of playtime with a game or 20 plays with a game, depending on which comes first. So this one, 19 plays, 24 hours, 12 total scenarios I've played in the game. And that is not even including all the in-between scenarios, you know, we'll talk about that when we get into the actual review. Before we get down to the review itself, I want to mention our sponsor, Board Game Code. This is a fantastic website where you can buy, sell, and trade games. They have a great selection to choose from if you're just looking to build out your collection, looking to get more games in that collection, you're not quite happy with what you got. They probably have exactly what you're looking for. They do a great job keeping games in stock, both the new hotness and the old classics. So one of the ways they do that, by the way, is a used game market that is thriving over there. And one of the ways they keep that thriving is they purchase games from you. If you go over there, they have a great way to get involved with that used game market where you can sell games to them. Very, very easy to do. But my favorite way to do it is through trading. They have a trade system where if you have a Board Game Geek account, you can, and you set up a trade list over on Board Game Geek, you can then drop your username into the Board Game Co. website. It will compare your trade list with their stock and build a custom trade list right there on their website. It makes it very, very easy to use. I strongly recommend it. Click on the link in the description below so they know I sent you over there. Board Game Co. makes it easy to buy, sell, and trade your way into a better collection. All right, now, of course, we do our reviews in the format of 5 reasons you should and 5 reasons you shouldn't buy this particular game. So we're going to start out with the 5 reasons you should. And number 1 is that there are unique challenges in every scenario with some minor mechanism additions frequently added into each scenario as well. And these are so, and essentially what this does is it provides a fresh feel for every scenario you go into. You know, you go in there, the first time you play a scenario, you really don't know what to expect. You don't know if this is going to be one where you're really rushing the clock, trying to maybe climb a tower before the waters rise or something like that, or if this is going to be more of a kind of, you're snooping around, a warehouse or something, trying to take your time figuring out what's going on and who you need to talk to and all this different stuff. So many different scenarios and little minor mechanism additions. And this isn't one where every time you play a scenario, it adds a mechanism, and then that mechanism is going to be something you got to remember for all future scenarios. In this one, the individual scenarios sometimes have mechanisms that you might not see elsewhere in the game. And I think that's really, really cool. It adds that really fresh feel to the game while you're playing it. And I for sure, when I was playing this, each scenario definitely, I went into it and discovered something that made me remember that particular scenario. Like, it had its own stamp that it left kind of on your memory of the game. And each one kind of had its own feel that left you slightly altered in the way you felt about the game too, because you go into it and you think you know what to fully expect from Etherfields at that point. Maybe you're 5 scenarios into the game, you feel like you kind of got a grip, and then it throws something a little bit new at you. And that's really cool that this game can do that in such a way that most of the time, most of those little minor adjustments didn't leave me wondering, how does this rule work? It almost always seemed pretty clear in that particular scenario how this new thing was going to interact with the existing rule set I already understood. And I really, really enjoyed that, and thought it was a pretty fresh idea. It's not something I've seen in other games, and so I like that they were able to do this. You know what it felt like? It almost felt like having these differences from scenario to scenario. Almost felt like each scenario was its own mini game, except that the scenarios had, you've got your overarching rule set that covers all the scenarios, and then somehow that rule set is then applied to a mini game. Almost. I've heard some people describe the scenarios as almost like escape rooms, and that also feels kind of right, but it's not exactly right, but kind of right. And so it's like a mini room or escape room, mini game kind of combo inside of this overarching rule set. And it really is a feel that I haven't had in other games, and I like that a lot. Number two is if you were really into long-form deck building. And what I mean by long-form deck building is, so if you're playing a game like Star Realms, 20-minute game, maybe 30 minutes on the long end, you're building your deck, and every single turn you're just piling new cards into your deck, and you're ripping cards out of your deck, and you're the real fast and furious style deck building. A lot of deck builders are like that. Thunderstone, I don't know about Thunderstone Quest, I haven't played that, but Thunderstone Advance would be a little bit of a slower burn on the deck building, but still, in one game, your deck is drastically altered in Thunderstone Advance by the time you're done with that game. In Etherfields, you're going to, let's see. So this is basically a starting deck. This is for the Free Spirit, who is the one that I played as. So here's a starting deck right here. And you're going to start with that. And then at the end, let's see, where is it? Yes. At the end of a scenario, maybe you'll have the ability, maybe you'll be given the opportunity to go to the influence market. And this is the influence market. And you can take, I believe it's 3 cards from the influence market, and you look at them, and then if you have the ether to purchase them, you can purchase them. And these then go into your starting deck here, and you put them in, and then that's going to, you probably are only going to be able to afford 1, maybe 2, especially towards the beginning of the game, every time you go here. And so you're slowly going to be adding cards to this deck. And then there's some guidelines in the rule book for how the minimum and maximum size of your deck. And so as you go along, you can start pulling cards out in between scenarios and putting new cards in. But look at all these cards that are available from the beginning of the game. Now, granted, you only draw 3, so it's going to take you a long time to see everything that's available here. But all of this is available from the beginning of the game for you to start customizing how your deck's going to work. That's really cool. And another cool aspect of the deck building is on the free, you see on the back of all the Free Spirit cards, there's this ability. As long as that is face up, so you have your main abilities here, right, on the cards, but you have this custom ability that's just for the Free Spirit. And if that's on top of the deck, you can use that ability. None of these influence cards that you buy from the influence deck have anything on their back, right? So as you start adding these to your deck, more and more likely on top of your deck, the ability is not going to be there. And that's a pretty cool kind of thought process you got to go through too, which is how much do you want to dilute your deck with these really cool influence cards to where you might lose the ability to use this custom ability for the Free Spirit, and each other, everybody else has the specialist has his own ability on there as well. And so you've got to think about that when you're adding more and more influence cards into your particular deck as to whether or not it's going to be worth it. And that kind of goes along with number 3, which is there are so many unlocks in this game. So I went through 12 scenarios, and these are the amount of cards that I went through that ended up now in the I forget what it was called, but they're out of the game, right? Like they're done with. They're not coming back into the campaign, and I've gone through these cards and they're not going to be used again. And so that's all these cards at some point were unlocked by me for the most part. There's some in there that actually were, exiled, or I forget what it's called. Anyway, that they were discarded out of the game permanently without me ever actually seeing them even. But a lot of these were unlocked. And then a lot of the stuff that was unlocked was also then put into my deck or put into this sleeve right here holds all the dream gates that you have access to, which is basically the beginning of a scenario. You use a dream gate to get into a scenario. And so you have this. And at one point I had 6 or 7 dream gates in here that I could use. You're unlocking, you have the overarching dream world map, which if you're used to like a Japanese RPG or something like that from, back on the Super Nintendo or whatever, the overworld map where you're walking around and you're going to different places. And that's like the dream world, right? And then when you end up in an encounter and it zooms way down to the battlefield, that's going to be the dreamscape. And so you're unlocking the dream world map, building out farther and farther. And every time you end a scenario, every time you beat a scenario, I should say, you're going to have 3, 4, 5 cards that you're going to unlock out of this enormous, I don't even. All right, so look, see that right there? That is, I hope you can see how wide that is. Those are all unlockable cards, right? Here, let's go. And these are the tiles. No, I'm going to mess that up. Essentially, that much of cards is a stack of unlockable tiles, which are going to have, dreams for you to go into, dream world tiles for you to explore out in the dream world, enemies, all kinds of stuff is inside of that stack. Same, and then these cards over here, same thing, all kinds of stuff in there. It is mind-boggling when you first start how much there is to unlock, and that's so rewarding. That really keeps you going. Like even when, there came a point where the game started to drag a little for me, but making to the end of a scenario to unlock cards got me pumped up for another scenario, even when I was starting to feel a little bit of a drag as far as the game goes and not necessarily enjoying the individual scenarios as much as I was at the beginning when I was first playing it. And, but if you were somebody who loves that unlock experience, this has it. In spades. I mean, there's so much here for you to unlock. And so number 4 is the theme, the components, the artwork. They're all deeply intertwined in every aspect of this game. So, I talked about the unlocks. I've talked about, these the individual decks that the player characters have. This is something that's kind of, I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. It's sort of overlooked, but I think it's really neat. You have these little triangle tiles that have just tiny little scraps of artwork on them, right? And you can see this one actually has the free spirit symbol in the back, meaning this particular one is only in the game if the free spirit's playing, whereas this one just has a number on the back, and so it's in the game no matter whether or not, no matter who's playing. But so it's just these tiny little scraps of artwork. And what the rules tell you about them once they're unlocked for you to use is that you can basically, anytime you're constantly searching for this artwork. It could be anywhere. It could be in these cards here. It could be in these influence cards here. It could be in any of these cards you unlock or any of these tiles that you unlock. You might find this little tiny scrap of artwork that matches to any artwork anywhere in the game. It could be what you're looking for. And as soon as you see it, the moment you see it, no matter when it is, no matter what phase of the game you're in, the moment you see it, you look at the number on the back and then go into the script book and find that number in the script book and read it. And whatever it says happens. It doesn't matter what else is going on in the game. You're on this constant search for just that little tiniest piece of artwork. And when you find, you want to talk about enjoying unlock stuff. When you find those, that's amazing. So, so that's a component of the game that I don't hear many people talk about, but I think is a very, very enjoyable piece. Then you've got the different dreamers, right? As far as components go, you got the different dreamers with their really cool standees, and all of these feel like, some sort of ethereal, just kind of, weird. Like it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. The way you might, the way a dream is going to, in real life, the way a dream is going to. When you're in it, it feels like everything makes sense. But then when you really think about what's happening, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you. That feeling is really carried through with the artwork in every aspect of the game. So much of this is just driving home that weird, but also familiar feel that I think a lot of us experience in dreams. And it's gorgeous artwork. It really draws you in a lot. And, I love that so much. You've got these beautiful components, these different tokens and everything. What else? You have these beautiful blue gems. So much about this game is gorgeous, and at the same time is bringing you deeper and deeper into the experience. I don't feel like any of the components pull you out of the experience. The one thing maybe is that for a lot of the enemies, rather than giving you specific miniatures for a lot of the enemies, or even specific tokens for a lot of the enemies, you just use these generic what are called shapeshifter minis. And I'm fine with that, because so many of the monsters are only in the game very briefly, just by the nature of how the game works. Certain monsters are going to make sense in certain dreams, and then it doesn't make sense for you to see them again. And so because of that, you use these kind of generic minis for them. But for some of the more significant monsters, you have specific minis for them as well. I'm trying to think what else I can tell you about the components. That so much of the components are in these cards that are unlocked, and I don't want to go too deep into that. But every time I would unlock it, it just brought me deeper and deeper into the game. And really, I just can't say enough good stuff about the components and about the artwork in terms of how much the theme is brought to life and is developed simply through the components. Now, the fifth thing I will say about why you should buy it is the story is a bit esoteric, right? It is, it doesn't always, you really don't know where it's going, right? And so what this allows, though, is completely unexpected turns and directions with the narrative. If you enjoy having absolutely no idea what's around the next corner in terms of narrative, if you enjoy not knowing where the next scenario is going to take you, this game is really for you. I mean, completely unexpected turns. And it's because you're going from dream to dream, there's no need for this continuity from this scenario to the next scenario, because of the fact that dreams can just completely change up on you mid-dream. You could be having a dream about something, and that same dream continues, but in a completely different, setting or whatever, right? Well, so certainly then when you go from a scenario to another scenario, there's no reason for there to be any continuity there. One's in an apartment building, the next scenario is on a pirate ship. That sort of disconnect. And if you like having that completely unexpected, random change in setting with no real knowledge of where it's about to take you, this game 100% is for you. It allows you to constantly feel like, there is something brand new around the next corner, because there is, in terms of not only theme, but also, as I said at the beginning of the video, mechanisms. And it is another way that the game helps itself to continue to feel fresh as you're playing it. Okay, so now 5 reasons you shouldn't buy Etherfields. Number 1, building off of that last point for 5 reasons you should. If you need a story that clearly makes sense, or makes sense in any way, shape, or form, this is not the game for you, okay? I've played, like I said at the beginning of the video, 12 scenarios, 19 plays, spent 24 hours of the game. After all that time, I have no clue what's going on. I have not a single clue what in the world the story is for this game. I remember specifically lots of different scenarios. I could probably name off, the general setting for most of those 12 scenarios because that's the kind of impression they left on me. But I got no clue what the overall story is. And supposedly there is an overall story. Obviously, I'm somebody stuck in a dream world of some kind. But I got that from the back of the box or from the Kickstarter. Zero concept of what's going on. Maybe that's me. Maybe that's me. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe I just can't grasp, the small clues and everything that the game provides. But I promise I'm not the only one. And I promise that if that's the case, if you're somebody who's going to not necessarily pick up on the smallest of clues to what the overall story is, then you're probably going to be as lost as I am. I have a sneaking suspicion that maybe when you make it to the end of the campaign, all of a sudden everything snaps into place. Maybe it's that type of game. But at this point, I'm, like I said, 12 scenarios in and 19 plays in, and to be perfectly honest, I'm done. I'm done playing the game. And we'll talk about a little bit more why I'm done once we get to the end of the video. But I'm not going to go any deeper into the campaign at this point. And I have enjoyed a lot of what I've seen, but I have no idea what in the world is going on. So if you're someone that needs that narrative that's going to make sense and continue drawing you in from a narrative standpoint, not just from this is really cool standpoint, but you want the narrative to draw you in across multiple stories and multiple scenarios, this probably is not the game for you. The rules as written have a lot of grind in between the dreams. So you have dreams and you have slumbers. Dreams, like I said, are when on that JRPG, the Japanese RPG, when you zoom down to the battle, those are the dreams. The slumbers are tiny little encounters that you have over on the overarching dream world map. And the slumbers can be very, very grindy, can get somewhat repetitive. There are some cool things about the slumbers that shouldn't be overlooked and that I think are worth exploring. The deliverance mechanism is something that's really, really cool where, without getting too spoilery with it, there's certain enemies that you'll face in the slumbers that have a deliverance script written in the bottom right corner. And you have, I believe, 5 different cards where you can try to deal with the slumber enemy in a way other than fighting it. And it's, basically through kindness or ambivalence or wrath or different, there's 5 different cards. And if you make the right choice, then something good will happen. Maybe that slumber enemy goes away because there's a whole deck of slumber enemies that you're dealing with. Maybe it goes away forever. Maybe you put it back in the box and it's done. On the flip side, if you make the wrong choice, you might really piss off that slumber enemy, and now the version you have goes away and a new worse version shows up and that doesn't have deliverance on it anymore, and so you're stuck with that one. So there's that constant grind in the slumbers, and they have released rules that apparently get rid of that grind, that basically allow you to go from dream to dream without dealing with the slumbers. I haven't seen that or I haven't used it, I should say. I did kind of read through it, but I didn't use it because I felt like the slumbers are a big part of what makes, that's where a lot of the development happens in the game. I mean, yeah, you get beat up in them, but also there's a lot of other stuff that happens in them. And I felt like I would be losing something if I took those out. And so I didn't take them out and I kept playing it. And eventually that grind did start to wear on me. In the beginning, I loved the slumbers. I thought they were really cool. I thought there was a lot to explore there. Eventually they started to wear me down. And so, yeah, if that kind of grind is something that's going to bother you, and especially if you're not the type of person that wants to use these rules that are released after the fact, and even in those rules, I believe it even states that this is not the intended way to play the game. And so, that's another thing for me when a rule set says this is not the intended way to play the game, I don't want to play the game that way, because then I'm like, well, the designers aren't even really behind this. They kind of released it under duress is what it felt like, because so many people were complaining about the slumbers. So keep that in mind, that the grind can get to be a bit much in between the individual scenarios. Number 3 is that you must read this script text carefully, especially at the end of a scenario. If you miss something in the script text, it can really mess you up. And to give an actual example that happened to me, one of these scenarios, I finish it up, read the script text, somehow I miss a particular card that I'm supposed to unlock, and it was a Dream World map card. And by not unlocking that particular map card, I boxed myself out of being able to go to a couple of scenarios. And I spent, I don't know, several hours wandering around trying to figure out why I wasn't able to make any progress before I finally went to Board Game Geek and asked a question. And people were like, well, if you've done this and this, then it sounds like you probably have done this scenario. And if you did that scenario, you should have this Dream World map. So then I went back and, picked it up and everything. And so that kind of solved the problem, but that did sour me on the game. And granted, that's partially my fault, right? Like, I didn't read carefully enough what's going on here. But I don't know. I mean, it's something if you're, let's say you're at the end of a game night, right? And I don't know what your game nights are like. Mine, a lot of times when I get to the end of a game night, we're kind of pushing the time limit there. A lot of people got to get going and stuff like that. And so we're kind of finishing up, reading real fast, trying to finish up. And it wouldn't be hard to miss a script. I'm generally pretty careful, when I'm going through these, in any game where you got this sort of thing where you're reading through line by line, unlocking as you go down. I'm usually pretty good with that. And somehow I still miss that. And it really, that's 3 or 4 hours that I spent wandering around doing nothing in this game, when I could have been continuing to make progress. So if you found in the past that being super careful with this, and I guess the more issue for me is that there's no checks and balance there. Even if they, like, for game breaking stuff, it feels like maybe they should, I don't know, underline an asterisk and bold face print it or something like that. And it's not really anything to really draw your attention to it like that. Again, I get that that's my fault, ultimately, that I didn't read carefully enough. It also feels like in a game where that could break the game, that there should be more attention drawn to those specific points, or, hey, do this thing right here, or you're going to break the game, you're not going to be able to keep playing. It feels like that should be a little clearer, a little more obvious. Again, though, I know it's my fault. I got it. You don't have to put that in the comments because I know it's my fault. But it did sour me on the game a bit. Number 4, the rule book is not organized well. So, and I say not organized well because most of the necessary rules to start the game are here. They are. Most of them are here. In fact, there are some rules that are repeated in multiple parts of the rule book, which sounds not like a terrible thing, other than it adds more to read. But then when also they're repeated like that, but one section is missing small pieces of the overall rules that the other section isn't. So like it repeats it, but this one repeats it slightly differently. And so it's missing 1 or 2 lines. And then this one did have. And so then when you go back and you're looking through the rule book, you find the one section, you're like, I know it's here with this. And then it's not. And now you're like, well, what in the world? And so then you have to keep flipping, and it makes it very confusing trying to find certain rules. And then there are sections of the rule book that seem to clearly belong in different sections of the rule book. Sometimes it feels like it oh, we forgot this rule. Where's an empty space and let's stick it here. That's kind of what some of it feels like sometimes. And I think there's a lot of challenge to writing a rulebook for a game like this where you're going to have rules unlocked as you play. So there is that challenge, and I acknowledge that. But there's there were a lot of complaints with this rulebook. When I was making my instructional video for Etherfields, I had a lot of trouble kind of making sure that I didn't repeat myself in the video because there is so much repetition in here. And making sure that everything was covered, because sometimes I'd feel like I repeated something, but then I would search the document and I actually hadn't. And so why did I feel that way? Oh, well, maybe it's because I decided to move this here, in the outline for the instructional video. I moved it to a different section because it made more sense there than it did where it is in here. Just not really well put together in terms of organization. And there are some rules that are simply left out. I don't feel like there's that many of those. I feel like rules being left out of here is not the issue. And I will say that fortunately there is an index. All right. The index does greatly improve your ability to find the rules you're looking for. If you don't use the index, because a lot of people for some reason don't seem to use the index, because I see a lot of talk, Board Game Geek, and the people that are complaining about a lot of stuff don't seem to reference the index. But even with the index, the rulebook is still confusing, especially when you're reading through it the first time. And especially keeping straight the difference between the Dream World map, the Dreamscape map, the Dream World map tiles, the entity tile. Like, there's a lot of terminology that is very similar and not well defined. Once you understand it, it makes sense, but it's not well defined in the rulebook. And so when you're reading the rulebook itself, it starts to all kind of glob together in your brain. The one good thing I will say about the rules is that the rules introduced through the wisdom cards in the game that you end up, kind of slide them in, not in this one, but you have this, this right here. You slide them into here and you keep them out for reference. Those do seem to be pretty well written. And so I never had much of a problem with the rules that were introduced once the game started and that were introduced through the wisdom cards. Those seem to be fine. But this rule book was a pain to get through. It was very confusing. I remember the first game that I played, I spent a lot of time kind of go back and forth with the rule book. What is the Dream World map? What is the Dreamscape map? All this stuff. It all seemed very confusing at first until I got through that first game or two, and then it all started to make sense. But this rule book is going to give you some problems. Almost everyone is going to have some problems with this rule book, so keep that in mind. Finally, if you must finish a campaign to feel like the game was worth it, be careful with this one. So, like I said, I'm done playing it. I'm not going to play it anymore. 12 scenarios, 19 games, 24 hours. The first 20 hours or so, first 18 to 20 hours, really, really enjoying my time. And then towards the end, the last 4 hours, there's 5 to 4 hours, the last 2 or 3 scenarios, it just got to be, started to feel a little bit repetitive. A lot of that was the slumbers, not the dreams themselves, but a little bit repetitive. The dreams themselves felt very difficult to figure out the first time through. And so I found myself playing a lot of times playing a dream multiple times because I just didn't understand what I was trying to do in the dream. And I don't know how much of that is me, how much of that is me not, me not grokking what the hints are trying to tell me and what the intro scripts are trying to tell me. Some of that could be me, but it got to the point where I just couldn't. The game sat. I have this table right here that I'm able to. On that side, I leave whatever campaign game I'm currently playing set up. This side I use for filming and for individual play games. And so I had Etherfields set up over there. I ended up going I ended up going a month and a half with Etherfield just sitting on that end of the table. And every time I look at it to come and start a new scenario, I'd be like, you know what? Let's play Hadrian's Wall. You know what? Let's do something else. You know what? Let's, film another video. And I could not bring myself to get to that next scenario. And after, it might have been 10 weeks of it sitting on that end of the table, I packed it up and ended up selling it on eBay. So this is getting shipped out in the next day or two. I And I had kind of struggled with this because I had so much fun for like 10 or what did I say? I've played 19 times. So I had so much fun for like 15 of those plays, like really a lot of fun. And if I got 15 fantastic plays out of a different game, out of Tawa Tensui or out of, I don't know, Red Rising, if I end up getting that many fantastic plays out of that game, I feel like that game was a really, really good game, really worth it. And somehow when you get that much out of a campaign game, but you haven't finished the campaign and the campaign's not holding your attention anymore, you feel like, well, was it? I mean, it gave me a lot, like 20 hours of fun from this game. But then I'm left feeling like, but I didn't finish the campaign, and it could not hold my attention for the entire campaign. So is the game worth it in that case? I don't know. That's a tough question for me to answer, because are campaign games judged in a different way than, individual play games are? I think I might have to make a video and really kind of explore that, because it's an interesting question. But if you need a game that is going to provide you that narrative to keep you going through the entire campaign, this really might not be the game for you. It wasn't for me. Obviously, I'm getting rid of it. I don't have any intention of revisiting it. So anyway, you know what? And one last thing, I didn't even see a reason to put this as one of the reasons not to buy the game, because this is really well covered. And I'm not going to go into too much detail. The game board, the actual board, I quit using it after 2 scenarios. Just do a quick Google search of Etherfields board, and you'll see it's like legitimately hot garbage. Awful. Supposedly it was created in that way because the game was tested only digitally because of the pandemic. And that's why they didn't realize how unusable it was, but it really is just not any good at all. So I haven't opened that board up since filming the first instructional video for Etherfields. It's a 2-part instructional thing. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this gives you some idea of whether or not Etherfields is a game for you or not. Please leave comments in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about it, your experiences with Etherfields. Am I off base on some of this stuff? What are your thoughts on campaign games? Do you need to want to finish the entire campaign for it to have been worth it? I'd love to hear what y'all have to say on all the different stuff I brought up in this video. And be sure to check out, we've got lots of great gameplays coming. I've got Kingdom Death gameplay, the Manhunter, coming up in the next couple of weeks. I've got Oath that I'm learning right now. I'm going to have a solo gameplay of Oath. I'm really curious how that's going to go. I've heard some mixed reviews about Oath solo, so we'll see how that goes. And until next time, from Bored Online, Bored Offline.